This is Omar Ramirez with the job experience, and today we have quality specialist Robert.
Hello.
Hello, Robert.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
So, I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, and I saw that for the longest, you've always been part of the whole technical field, right?
Correct. My original degree was in computers, and I've been in computers ever since.
Wow. And what led you up to that?
Just personal experience. When I was a kid, I was messing with computers. My parents had a old computer in the early '80s,
Uh huh.
and from there, I was hooked and just been into it ever since.
Wow.
Working on them, building them myself, taking them apart, things like that.
And that's always been like your love. You never fallen out of that.
No, I've always been fascinated by the computer technology, and as it progressed, I've always kept myself, you know, reading up on the latest technology or get my hands on it and mess with it and take, dissect it, so to speak, and
Hmm.
try to keep it, you know, neat. It was really cool to learn all that stuff over the years.
What do you think is the best training for someone that wants to move into the whole technical field?
Well, if it's a person that's had access to technology like I had, just keep reading, keep learning. Um, there's always new technology being developed. Technology is always advancing. So for a young person has always had a hand in it in some way or fashion, just keep at it, keep learning new stuff. If it's someone that has never done it before and it just wants, just to jump into it, then start with the basics, just like with anything, and work your way up from there. Correct.
So was that like? Because I'm trying to get to like the like main point where for you it just became that motivation to go into that field. Was it someone around you? Was there like a mentor?
I would have to say my brothers.
Oh, really?
My two older brothers were in heavily into technology, and eventually the third one ended up. Three older brothers, and the third one also ended up in technology as well. So that kind of just dragged me into it as well with the curiosity. So my brothers were, I remember my brothers messing with an old circuit board and doing wiring with the transistors and things like that in the early '80s, and it always fascinated me to sit there and watch them do that stuff, and they're always playing around with technology and showing me the latest computer that my oldest brother would buy when he was working in the technical field, and he's been in it for all his life, as far as I
Wow.
know. He's worked with the Canadian government and doing their stuff, and then my other brother was in engineering and science, computer science stuff, and then the other one was also doing similar stuff to what I was doing. Actually, he at one point he was doing QA as well, and product manager stuff, and now he's technical support, like help desk or so to speak. But I think more of an admin at this point. But yeah, you progress through the different stuff and you see them doing that, and of course that also intrigues you because you ask questions, and one thing leads to another, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump into that field too.
So you always had also the support and the guidance from your brothers, right?
Yeah, they're always willing to show me the latest and greatest. Oh, check this out, and I always got my
That's cool.
curiosity going, and yeah.
So you were born and raised in Canada, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then are you out of your brothers and sisters, are you the only one here or is everybody still back in Canada?
My three older brothers are in Canada. I live in the U.S. Here. I went to college here, and I did some jobs up there, technical jobs up there. But then because of, I think it was 2003, the recession that about that time,
Mm.
I was forced to try to find a job down here because there was very limited work up there. And then I was able to land a good job in San Antonio, Texas, and I stayed with them for about 10 years once I found that job. And from there, it went from that's where I ended up getting into QA actually. Uh, I did technical support over the phone. Uh, Not the greatest for some people,
But
but
that's a good start, isn't
it
it?
is a good
Oh,
start. And it was, of course, it's enterprise level software that I eventually worked my way into and lead support. And I was helping customers install new versions of the software into their computers. So I'm actually walking them through, um, excuse me, to see if it fixed their problem or addressed their needs. And I guess it got the attention of the QA department, and they were like, "Well, you're kind of doing QA already
mm.
with the customer, so why don't you come over here and help us make it better for the customer?" And so I moved into the QA space, and I've been there ever since. So it's like 13, 14 years now I've been in QA.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's a while.
Yeah.
So, how was the transition from working in Canada to working here in the U.S.?
Ah, I don't know how to answer that. It really isn't much of a difference.
Mm.
It's all technical stuff. When I was in Canada, I did phone support, fortunately for their internet service up there. But I also worked for a company called JDS Uniphase, which was building fiber optic components for a large company called Nortel at the time.
Mm.
And you know that stuff fascinated me, but it was just assembly of technical devices and using their equipment. But then I got into the technical support, and that of course helped me land the support job with the company in San Antonio, Texas when I came down. So even though I'm jumping from country to country, they still look at your job experience, and that's a good thing. So that allowed me to land the job here.
How's the interview process for a QA? Like, what kind of questions are they being asked?
The QA field is kind of unique in the whole range of um, technical field. So just to step back a little bit, like if you're doing support or if you're help desk or something, there's actual certifications, A plus certification, Network plus certification, fancy Microsoft ones, things like that. In the QA segment, there is certifications, but it's not one that everybody recognizes. There's not one universal one, so to speak. So like A plus certification is that you understand the hardware components and
Mm.
stuff like that, and you're able to that shows the employer that hey, I know how to work on.
Is it kind of like in levels?
For those certifications, sort of. There's the A plus, which is like the hardware. You're the help desk kind of guy, and then the Network plus is more like a network technician or admin, or and then there's CISO certifications and things like that. So all that is like, oh, it's great. You know how to do networking and computers, and you can be your help desk and so forth. So for in the QA segment, there's not one company with one certification that all the QA go get. There's a whole bunch of certifications, and some people don't recognize some of them, and there's not really a universal one. At least the last time I checked, there wasn't a universal one. And then on top of that, there's not the last time I checked, there wasn't really a lot of courses that help you jump into the QA segment. Like if you go to the university colleges, there's not a QA course, so to speak. There's courses for programming, there's courses for hardware, so forth. Excuse me. But in the QA segment, there's not really. It's a unique thing. I don't know exactly.
Is it like based on experience and you
Ye-
gotta learn everything else before you
yeah.
get to here?
So when you do get an interview with someone for a QA position, nowadays they're going to be looking for programming proficiency. So if you know certain languages like Java, Python, things of that type, so you're going to have your hand a little bit in programming, because they want to be able to automate their tests. They don't want 10 people sitting there plugging away at their app and trying to find all the defects, when you can have 2 or 3 people, maybe one doing manual and then the other two just programming the scripts together to do automation testing to see if your app will crash or not crash, do what you want it to do. So that's one of the things that they're looking for. And then they also need you to understand the what do you call it? The the different aspects of QA. So like you have to have an understanding of the process. The process, that's the word I was looking for. Processes. So if you have a good understanding of the processes, the software development, and things like that, it's a little bit kind of like a product manager would understand. Then that would be perfect, as well. They will look for someone. Hey, do you know what Agile is? Do you know what waterfall is? Do you know what, those type of processes? Because a lot of companies use those processes to do the cycle of their development of the software. So I have an app. It goes through a process. They hammer it out, the requirements out, and then they go from that to okay, so now we need to provide the information to the QA so they can developers. Sorry, first the developers, and they got to develop the software, and then it goes to the QA. So there's this process that goes through, and those, like the agile I explained, is just how they get to point A to point B in that process.
So those are like universal processes that everybody that's involved in that
Yes.
field is already aware of.
Yes. So it's one of the things that they look for when they're hiring QA. And then also the technologies related to QA. So like I said, the programming languages, that's one. And another one is understanding of whatever the app that, or web page. Maybe it's a web page. Maybe you have to have understanding of HTML 5 or Java or something like that. So they have to see if you understand that stuff, because when you're testing it, that's what you're interacting with. If you're testing like an app or like I don't know, a application of some sort, then they're going to ask you stuff like, okay, well, this application touches SQL. Do you understand SQL? So when there's a problem, you're trying to figure out a problem with the software, you have to be able to access the database, SQL or whatever, to see if the app or the application put the data into the database like it was supposed to. So you have to be able to query the database. So that's another thing that's really hard about QA, is that when you go to the different companies, they have a different list of requirements, and there's not one QA with one list of requirements. So if I was help desk, it'd be like, okay, you understand Linux, you understand Microsoft, you understand hardware. Okay, so every company, help desk, it's almost cookie cutter, right?
Right.
But in QA, it's all a variety of stuff because the apps do all sorts of different things.
Wow.
So that's like, I have a good knowledge of point of sale systems because I did testing for point of sale systems for one of the companies. And I put that on my resume. I put that out on, I think it was Monster and LinkedIn a while back. And all the people that have point of sale systems were reaching out to me, Oklahoma and down in South Texas. And there was all these companies that were like, hey, we want you to test our point of sale systems. So, whenever you get a chance, like if you're in the technical field and you have a chance to get in QA, and you understand the application that you're going to be testing, then that's a foot in the door to other places too. So definitely learn all the different technologies, all the different applications that QA people would use. Definitely learn automation. That's a big thing right now.
Right. Yeah.
Every job that I saw recently, part of the requirements was you got to be knowledgeable in some sort of automation tool, like Test Complete, Appium, things like that, and some sort of language as well that goes with it.
And how do you keep how do you stay updated with all the new software and development that's going on? Is that something that you go out of your way to try to understand and try to kind of learn about?
Well, there is information out there where there's new technologies that are coming out for QA people. You can keep up to date with that. There's actually QA forums. Hey, I test this software. have any recommendations of what
Mm.
um, tool I can use, and people will be happy to help you with that. Um, there's also seminars and things like that for QA. So if you are interested in learning about QA, quality analyst stuff, or quality assurance, there's different titles that fit for tester.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would check one of the basic, like beginner type of seminars, introduction kind of thing, and see if it's something that you really want to get into. And there's lots of seminars with all different types of technologies explaining how to use it to utilize it for your purpose. So there's a lot of information out there, and I try to keep my hand on some of that stuff to try to keep myself up to date.
Mm.
And it's always evolving. It's always evolving. Like 5 years ago, it was a lot of job requests for just manual testers. Now, when you look at the lists for QA people, there's not very many manual anymore. There's a lot of people that are transitioning over to automation.
Mm. That's one of the things that I saw that was one like job that was most essential nowadays is an automation specialist.
Yeah.
How does that fit into a QA specialist?
Yes. So what I've seen in the industry is that a lot of people that worked in development, who build software or did the programming on the back end stuff, those guys tend to be people that can easily transition over to automation people. So, but if you're someone that's getting into the field of QA, I'd highly recommend learning programming language, the tools that they use for testing the software. So, for example, Appium. So, Appium is a tool provides you with the necessary equipment for you to tap in with a script. So, let's say I use JavaScript. I call on Appium. Appium understands what I'm asking it, and it goes out and touches the app like it does a tap on a button, or it loads a link, or things of that nature. So um, it's important to for for someone that was programming and stuff like that. They understand just the other side of things, like the processes and stuff like that. Now, another thing about QA people is that they have to have a really good attention to detail, or like
Mm.
really think about the broader picture always. You can't always just think about your little piece. So when you as a QA or tester, you're an advocate for the user. So that's one of the things that we also have to keep in mind. And not everybody
Yes.
has that ability, so to speak. So I've seen people that, hey, I'm going to be a tester, and they jump in and they fail to see how I don't know how to describe it, but they don't see it from the customer's aspect point of view all
Mm.
the time. And of course, defects get through, and then there's issues with the app. So you always have to think about, okay, when a customer is using this application, what are they going to do? And you have to think of the wide range. Think of the so probably not the best word to use, but you have to think of the idiots all the way to the smart people. So users, like, website testing is really extreme range, because you're going to get all sorts of different people looking at your website, and they click on this link. Well, why would they click on this and click on that? That doesn't make sense. So, I mean, there's no point in testing that, because if they don't do that, there's no point. Well, you're going to get that one idiot that decides to test that, click that and click that, and things are going to happen, and it's going to break.
Yeah. And there's those people that are very impatient, right? That just want to get to it. They don't care about the details. They don't
Exactly.
even want to read it. Because I'm even kind of like that. I don't, sometimes I just jump into, like, I was doing, like Excel coding, and I'm the type of person that I don't have much patience. So when I would be doing coding within a software in Excel, I would get those errors, and then when I go back, it's like I missed something, you know. But me not having patience, I want to type in the code right away and just be done with it, you know. So I would probably be one of those dumb people.
Yeah, patience definitely comes into play
Yes.
with QA as well because you have to make sure you think of all the angles, test all the angles. Um, the downside of being a tester is that you get an app with maybe some changes in it, maybe new features, and in 1 year you're going through, and you might run through 10 cycles of that same test plan with the new features tested in there as well. But you're going to have a set of tests that are going to test the features that exist already, and you're going to drone through that every time you go through the testing. So whether it's automated or manual testing, you have to run through it and make sure that existing features have not broken when the developers did their changes to the app.
Mm.
So it, yeah, you have to have a little bit of patience because there's times where I had 500 test cases and I had to do that all manual. And it was to test different markets and things like that to make sure that the app still behaved according to what it was supposed to do. Was it necessary? Did I catch stuff once in a while? Yeah. I mean, there were minor issues or corner cases, stuff that people don't really do very often, but that could be the sucky part of testing. It's just there's just some stuff that you're just gonna have to do every single time, and it can wear you out sometimes because it's a lot, and that's the reason why. A lot of companies are trying to get into automation or trying to pull automation in. They're trying to eliminate that useless
Mm.
testing, so to speak, from our perspective. It's important testing, but from a QA guy, it's a waste of time.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So automation automates all that, and all they have to do is focus maybe on the new stuff, maybe a couple of the old stuff, and that's it.
If it's possible to have algorithms that can
Yeah,
do that process, might as well than somebody doing it, right?
yeah. So yeah, and then the other advantages of automation tests is you can run it overnight.
Mm.
So you have your employees come in and they do the new features, maybe some of the changes, some fixes, testing, and then overnight, all the usual stuff that gets tested every cycle is run automated. And then when you come into work the next day, you have a nice report showing what failed, what passed.
Mm. Wow, so it's like a 24/7 thing.
It can be, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It
Okay.
can be. I've worked with companies that actually do load testing of the software. So the software has to be able to handle heavy loads of people doing things, a lot of processes going on in the app, and it's working really really hard. So you got to test it and make sure it doesn't just
Mm.
crash or lose the people. Customers' data, things like that. So you got to do load testing. So there's a lot of different types of testing that you need to do in QA. So it's not just automation or manual. Uh, there, there's a lot of different things that we actually do. There's a lot of different processes,
Mm-hmm.
and one of those is load testing for some companies with their apps.
Mm. And then here we go. So there's like there's skills to becoming a QA specialist, and one of the ones that we talked about is you need to have patience, right? What would be other skills required for a QA specialist?
Just someone that has a knack for details. Um,
Because most of the stuff is kind of learning the software and the hardware and all that, right?
Yeah, I noticed that being in the industry for quite a while, there's some people that um, they have great knowledge of the technologies, have great knowledge of programming,
Mm.
great knowledge of the process, but they just don't have the knack to think of all the angles or or maybe they don't have the patience. So you gotta have a level of um, you have to think more of details oriented, and you got to be meticulous and think of all the angles, and you got to be the advocate for the customer all at the same time. And it's just some people just
They don't have it.
they just don't have it. So I've seen that where a person comes in just like what I just described. They know all the technology, but when they sit down and test, they're missing things left and right, or they're not quite sure of where all the angles, so to speak. So sometimes they're running through it and it's great, but they miss all these
Mm.
interesting corner cases, or they're hyper focused on the test steps. There's people like that too, where they look at the test steps of the test case and they're going, okay, 1, 2, 3, okay, that passed, check. Um, Sometimes what I do is I go through that and I look around a little bit. I look at the
Mm.
surrounding function and make sure that it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. You know, make sure it didn't break this, make sure it didn't break that. Sometimes it's not necessary, sometimes it is. You know, maybe the developers say, hey, we just changed the whole back end technology of the app. And, you know, we want you to test it, but we also want you to make sure we didn't break anything. Well, then you take your standard, your your set of test cases, and then you're going, okay, well, as I test that, I'm going to do a little bit what's called black box testing, going around, you know, just testing random
What
things
is
that
that called?
black box testing.
Oh,
So you basically don't really have a plan. You kind of maybe have a guideline. You're just going off of what you know about the application. Um, you know, there's like I said, there's a lot of there's a lot to
right.
this. There's a lot to this. If you want if you want good understanding, you know, just do some research on QA processes, because there's a lot of different types of tests, different ways of going about it, and then there's the different processes involved, like I said, agile or things like that.
And is this something that you can do at home? This position, do you do it at home or do you have to go to like an office?
No, my previous job, I was 100% working from home.
Mm.
The company was in San Antonio, and I was here in Dallas, and I spent, I think it was about a year, working from home.
Well,
I tested a website application, and I did everything from where I was, and meetings were held over the phone, and I think a good portion of the group I was dealing with was already in another city. I think they were in Chicago. So it didn't really matter anyways.
right.
I was doing calls with them anyways. So this job, yeah, if you're testing something like websites or maybe a phone app, those things can very easily be done from home. If you're dealing with like server applications and things like that, you need access to the equipment. Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
And working from home is you think it's a big benefit?
There's pluses and negatives. um, uh, you know, with work, you know, right now with what's going on with the COVID, you know, we're forced to work from home anyways.
Right.
So we have to
Nothing new for
adapt.
you, right?
Yeah, I like I said, the previous job I was working from home, so it was just like, oh great, I'm back at home. So I originally went to the other job because I was trying to get away from working from home, because it can wear you out. I mean, if you're
Right.
like a real social person, it hurts, because I mean, yeah, you're gonna communicate with your coworkers face to face,
Right.
and that interaction will allow you to speed up communication. But
Mm.
when you're working from home, you have to figure out ways to make sure that communication is still going on and adapt to it.
And then you send an email and it probably doesn't come back right away, right? And it's an answer that you need right there and then.
Yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, the person's downstairs getting coffee. But
Yeah.
yeah, and if you're in the office, you just walk over to them in the coffee room, say, "Hey, I got a question
Yeah.
for you."
It would be great if there was like like jobs that would be in that balance. Maybe like some days stay at home and some days work at the office.
Yeah, one of the companies that I used to work for, I kept in contact with the some of the employees there, and they were trying that.
Oh,
They were trying a couple days at home, a couple days at work, a couple days at home, um, and it seemed like it was a positive thing.
hmm,
Some of the people actually liked it. Um,
yeah.
it just depends. I do know with the company that I'm at right now, they did say that with everybody, the IT portion of the technology group, this is what they're referring to. I think it could have been the whole company, but I think it was the technology group. And they said that we as a group were more productive
Mm,
with us all being at home,
really?
which is interesting. Yeah.
Mm,
So everybody's, you know, able to interact with their family, but at the same time do their
yes.
work. They're able to do it remotely. If they're dealing with a baby,
Yep.
maybe they can spend a little bit of time with the baby and then get back to the work after the baby has taken a nap. Things like that. So they have, the, with all this COVID stuff, the people have had to adapt and work around things that they can't plan. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
And I would think the employees would be more happy like that. No, they would be more encouraged, more
some
motivated to
some
get
are,
back to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are really good in that setting. I personally I do okay. I'm okay with it, but I like being able to go to the office and interact with people. But at the
Right.
same time, I also like being at home and when my kid has a question, I can just turn around and answer their question and
Right.
interact with them or see my wife. Uh, have lunch with my wife all the time, things like
Yeah.
that. So there's
Yeah.
advantages and disadvantages. It just depends on the type of person you are or what the job you're doing, maybe.
Yeah. Because like the beginning, like in May, um, my company decided to do because we work 4 days, 4 days a week. So we did 2 days stay at home and 2 days go to the office, and we did that for the whole month of May, and that was great. Because when we would stay home, I would be with my daughter and my wife, and we'd be doing activities. We go out, and it was great. And then the next day you go to work, and you also want to get all the work out of the way.
Yeah.
You kind of work even harder.
Yeah, you're more refreshed.
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
You're more rested. You already had some quality time with your family. Now you know that you're in the work environment, and you want to get everything out so that way you don't have to come back the next day. you know.
Yeah.
So that was great.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
love that.
Yeah, I enjoy that too.
I saw that you worked also in like fast food restaurants. Well, not actually in fast food restaurants, but more of the technical side, right? So
Yeah,
how?
so a lot of people don't think about when they think of IT, they always think of technical companies like
Mhm.
Microsoft, Google, things like that. And um, when you do a search for jobs and stuff, you'll find out that there's a lot of different types of companies that have different needs. So a good example, besides I'll get to the fast food part here in a sec, but
Mhm.
I was surprised by this one. It was a job offer from, I think it was Oklahoma, and it was for their point of sale systems, but it was for a gas station company. So
Mhm.
I can't remember the name of them, but uh, they're like, you see one once in a while here in Texas, but a lot of them are more north. The gas, it was a gas station company, and they needed me to test their point of sale systems, and with all these different types of companies out there, they all, like nowadays, they all have to have a hand in technology in some way or fashion.
Mm.
So the fast food market is actually trying to transition to technology pretty heavily. Like
Mm.
they're realizing that their customer base wants technology. So like the car manufacturers, they put uh, the screen with
Mm. Mhm.
the apps and the fancy GPS on in the cars and all this fancy gizmos and stuff inside the car. Well, as they do that, all the other companies and stuff, they have to be pulled into the technology as well
Mm.
because they're falling behind. So that was one of the interesting things about being in the fast food market, is because some of the companies that I had seen, walked into their store and seen the point of sale system, seen their menu, and you don't think about it, but they started to realize, like in the past maybe 5, 10 years, I've seen them really transition. So now when you walk in, you got what? You got a point of sale system where it doesn't require a person to interact with you. So that software right there, someone has got to test that.
Makes sense. Yep.
And then the menu, the menus that you see, they're TV screens, right? They're showing, what's the special that's going on right now, and they show you like a great example is the McDonald's one. You walk in, you see a coffee being poured, and then it shows you the coffee menu, and you're like, "Whoa, maybe I should get a coffee. That looks good." So it's a way to entice people too. Those menus also need to be tested, and the point of sale systems, of course, have to be updated to be able to do the stuff that they want to do now too. So they got to update that stuff, and then there's more to it. There's the systems that the people in the back, they're making the food in the back. They got to be able to see what the orders are coming in. They got to be able to see, so that way they can knock it out faster, right? They're all about how quickly they can do stuff, and then everything ties it together to what's called a BOS, back office system. All there's a system in the back that handles all the stuff that's going on in the store, and then that system communicates with a home-based server of the company, and every night they probably get updates, with latest menu changes and stuff. So there's a whole, real
Right.
fancy thing
It's a
going
whole
on.
different animal.
And it didn't used to be like that. A great example of someone being pulled into the new technology is, I think, I'm going to say their company name, Wendy's, because I've seen where I walk into their restaurant and I see these old style POS systems with the very old fashioned screen menu system with the touch button. And then their menu, you look up and you see, the board where they slide in and out the prices and stuff. And I would go to this Wendy's all the time. And in the past 5 years, like 5 years ago, they all suddenly
Transition over to
screens, new POS system, which touch screen with the button, touch screen buttons, and you know, and you can do your Apple Pay, and it's like night and day. Boom, transition right over. So they're forced into that. So the company that I worked for, they were still transitioning on some of the stuff too, and some of their technology was old. So that's one of the things that they have to deal with that's another thing about testing, is that you're going to deal with some companies that have legacy equipment. So they're going to have some new stuff, and they're going to have some old stuff, and they're going to try to talk to each other. So the POS systems were kind of old, but I mean, they had the touch screens, and but all their back systems was fairly new. But the database and stuff was old, and so there's a lot of mixture going on, and it certainly makes testing quite interesting when you're trying to help them bring themselves up to date. And you got to make sure that you try to, as a tester, bring your standards up as well too. So if you are helping the company, you're bringing your standards up to try to help them, find all the issues with all this odd equipment talking to each other at the same time. I'm sure in the next 5 years or so, a lot of that equipment that they were using is probably going to be gone by then, and they're going to have all more updated, modern databases and back office systems and POS systems and things like that. But right now, there's some companies that are just they're in between. They got technology that their customers are using, the Apple Pay, the Google Wallet, whatever that it is called now, and they have to have that interact with the systems that they've had for years, and they got to talk, and there's going to be issues, and as a tester, we got to try to make sure we capture all those issues, especially with payment stuff. Payment stuff is really important for the company because that's how they get their revenue. So if me as a tester, I don't properly test the Verifone device that interacts with your credit card or something like that, it's gonna be a bad day for them if you don't test it right. And so, yeah, that's one of the challenges of working with the fast food industry. I've worked with, well, I'm with one right now, but the other one was, I mean, they're both doing the same kind of thing. They're trying to pull themselves into the new era of the technology. The company I'm with right now, they didn't have a QA. They had a third party build the software for them and test it.
Mm.
And I don't know what their decision was, but they wanted to bring everything in house. So they hired their own QA, they hired their own developers, and everything else that goes with it, and try to pull themselves into the modern times. So now, in the like I said, in the past 5 years, we've seen a whole bunch of restaurants come out with apps too. So the apps now got to interact with the point of sale systems,
Mm.
the databases. So that way, when the guy pulls up the menu, he's got what the customer is wanting for their meal. So there's a lot of
Yep, there's a lot of interaction in
yes,
between everything, right? Wow,
yeah.
that's crazy.
So it was it and it is a very interesting time to be working in this industry, but there's a lot of other companies right now that are trying to pull themselves into this modern time, and there's always going to be someone that's trying to pull themselves into more new technology. And as long as you, as a QA tester, or I mean anything in the IT technology segment, you always got to make sure you're up to date on the latest technologies. So if you're just getting started, you know, learn the new stuff that's coming out. Always learning this new stuff. HTML5 is fairly new. That replaced a lot of stuff. Java is supposedly going away. So, what are you going to do? Well, I used to know Java. I'm going to switch over to
Mm.
HTML5, right? Um, yeah. So as technologies advance, we got to make sure that as a technical,
Catch up.
yeah, we got to play catch up all the time and make
And
sure
this
that you're
just
up to
seems
date.
like fast food restaurant just gonna want to go faster and faster
Yes,
and faster.
fast food restaurants are very fast, and they're always making money. You see new types of restaurants always opening up. And as they expand, they got to make sure that their network is good, their databases are good, everything that interacts in that environment is good. So yeah, it's a quite an interesting industry to be in, and I've learned a lot being in that industry. Um, and I've also worked with companies that build software that support different types of industries, but they also that software that I helped with would support that type of industry as well.
And it's more complicating now for new business owners that, when now they want to start a business, or maybe they had an idea back in the day and they're finally putting it to work now. But now, not only do they have to take into consideration the building, the lease, the materials, but now also all the technical stuff
That's correct.
and getting somebody that's involved in IT. So now, they thought it was going to be this much to get their own small business, but now it's going to be probably
Yeah.
twice as much.
Yeah. So if you want to make your business succeed, you really have to think of the technical aspect of it. You have to think about social networks. Unfortunately, some people are not big fans of Instagram and Facebook because they're the older segment of population. But if they're choosing to open up in a business of their own, they
They
have to
have
now.
to.
They have to because
Everybody's on there.
everybody's has their eyes on it, and it's a chance to put your business name in an ad in front of their face. So if someone, how Facebook is right now, where you scroll
Mm.
and every so often you see one of those ads, those companies are making money off people that say, "Hey, I need that," and they just tap on it.
So easy to. I mean, now it's not even if you need it. If it shows up, be like, yo, oh, I want that, and then just like right there and then they can click on it and they have it.
Exactly, yeah, and it tie into the your business, and you're making money. Yeah,
So how long in the future do you think everything will be kind of more automated?
I don't I don't know the answer to that because in my field, the QA, there's still a lot of limitations in the
Mm.
automation software. So in the past, I'm gonna say 10 years, I've seen automation where it was one guy with the supporting software building the necessary code, the scripts or whatever to test the app or whatever. And now I've seen where there's they hire multiple people to do the automation because they want more people to do the automation. And then I've also seen where the technology has been more well developed to be able to test things. So like the point of sale systems with the screen with the
Mm.
buttons on it.
Mhm.
Well, instead of having a person tap on those buttons, you're having software that you say, okay, I'm looking for this button. It finds the button and it taps on it for you. So we
Wow.
have technology that will scan what is on the screen and mirror match. I'm sorry, match up the button, the image of the button to the image somewhere on the screen.
Wow.
And then there's also website automation where you have the necessary code. That's another thing. You have to have the necessary code in the background to support
Mm-hmm.
automation testing too on like a web page. If you don't have the proper IDs or stuff like that, your automation tool is going to be hard to find things. But nowadays, more people are putting that stuff in there, and the tool can grab onto the necessary buttons or the links and find them right away and tap on them for you. So the technology for automation has been developing. In the last 10 years, I've seen quite huge strides where it can just find anything on the screen and tap on it for you. You can locate it by coordinates, if it has ID, if it's like a website, or some application that has IDs that it can grab onto, or images. So the the QA group has gone from being mostly manual with maybe an automation guy to now probably half and half. In some companies, is even less manual testers and a huge group of automation programmers. So it's been changing quite a bit. So will we completely get rid of manual testers? Not anytime soon, I don't think. There's always going to be a need for some manual testing, but what I do see is that a lot of your QA people are going to be more proficient in programming and the technologies that allow you to do the testing uh, with with your scripts and stuff, and there won't be a need for as much manual testers. Um, it, will it be 100%? I don't know. I don't really think so right now because now the latest thing that I've read about is AI.
Mm-hmm.
So they you could tell it, okay, I want to go from here to here, and the AI will try to figure out how to get there with testing.
With the evolution of technology and the apps, do you see there be more and more apps, or is there gonna? Do you think it's gonna be a slowdown of that?
I don't think it's ever going to slow down because technology is always advancing. Our phones are way more capable than the computer that I started learning
Mm.
on, right? So as the technology of the processing power of our phones and the computers that we use, the apps are always going to have to be updated, always with new
Mm.
to be able to support the new technologies. So, for example, I have games that I used to play with on the computer in the 90s, and I try to install that in the computer nowadays, and the computer is like, "What's this?" The game doesn't even know how to run either because
Right.
the system's just too fast for it. So then you have to do provisions to get it to work.
Mm. So like even though the app's already created, there's still updates required for that app.
Always,
And
always.
even if it's still there, it might transition into something uh, pretty much almost new, but still the same concept of
Yeah.
it.
So with these companies, they're always going to be trying to do uh, maybe three things. They're always going to be trying to fix defects. So someone's going to have some new phone or some new OS on the phone, and it's going to break the app somehow. And then there's always going to be so there's going to be the fixes, and then there's going to be always new features. So the business is always going to be like, well, how can I um, incorporate this new social media website
Mm.
into my app? Because there's always new social media being developed too.
Yep.
So how do I incorporate that into my app? Well, we put a link in it or a button for it. Okay, well now we got to release a new app version to support that.
Mhm.
And then, of course, there's always going to be the back end, dealing with the back end technologies and stuff like that. Maybe you update your server. Well, will the app communicate with that server
Mm.
anymore? No. Well, we got to update the app now.
Oh,
So there's the supporting, there's the new technologies, and then there's defects that you're always going to be
mm.
dealing with. So in my job, I test an app for a phone. It's nonstop work.
Mm.
Sometimes the build has not very many things in it. May not have to do that much testing, and then sometimes it has a lot of stuff that's got to be tested, including new features. So at first I was like, well, I don't know how much testing I want to be doing with this app, and so far it's been go go
Oh,
go
really?
constantly. Yeah,
Mm.
every month has been a release at least.
So for people out there that want to create their own apps, some might think that they're just going to create an app and that's it. But no, there's more maintenance on it, and it's almost
Yeah,
a
so
daily basis, right?
so if someone builds an app and let's say it's for Android and it's for their business, and they just want to be able to let people order something, right? Maybe order flowers or something. So they build that app and they release it into the Google store or whatever, Android store, and people install it on their phone. It'll work for a while, but then
Mm,
other technologies are being updated, and it's going to
mm,
force you to
everything
do
else
something
around
about it.
it.
Yep.
Wow. Is there a big difference between the Android apps and the Apple apps?
There's differences, yes. There's also a lot of different processes too. And
Mm.
that's one of the challenges with developing an app for a phone, is to deal with the two different technologies. Um, the the Android phones. Well, it's Android OS, right?
Hmm.
Um, they're always uh, they're always doing changes to it. And there's always development in it. There's always, but usually it's a very stable environment at this point. So people that develop software can usually get away with it for several versions of the Android releases, and and it's a lot of people know it. A lot of people, programmers
Mm.
and stuff. iOS, well, being a proprietary operating system, they're very controlled about it. If you're releasing an app, you have to submit it. Well, you got to submit it with Android, but there's a process that Apple goes through that's very convoluted at times. So it takes longer for you to release the app through the iOS versus the Android. And then plus your development. Well, if I'm let me tester. Let me
Hmm.
if I'm testing uh, iPhone, well, I gotta have an iPhone, right? I also have to have something that can communicate with it. So when we were doing our um, development for automation, we had to build a code set that works for iOS, and then we had to build a code set for the Android.
Mm.
So we were able to get Android done a lot quickly, very quickly, and the iOS was a little bit more trickier because of how they do their OS is
Mm.
a little bit trickier, a little bit different. Some things was a little bit easier, some things was a little more difficult, and so we had to have a code set that supports both those different OSs to be able to test the app. Um, Now the back end process and stuff like that, I think it's fairly the same between the two, but how that app interacts with the OS is different. I think that's more of a developer question,
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But as a tester, that's what I've had to deal with. We had to build something to support each of the OSs and be able to interact with them. So it yeah, it's a little bit challenging when you're trying to work with multiple technologies. That's the downside of also testing, is that you're gonna have to deal with multiple technologies. If you're gonna build your app, you know, you're like, okay, well, I'll just build it for Android. Well, you're limiting your market too.
Yes.
So you got to do it for the
Do you need
iPhones.
two people that are specialized? Do you have one person that specializes in Android apps and one person that specializes in iPhone apps, or is it
Usually, nowadays developers are proficient in both.
Mm.
QA testers are proficient in both. Um, in our environment, we just happen to have one person with Android and another person with iPhone, so we're more testing
Mm.
bias in that aspect. So, like for me, I'm the person that tests usually the Android, but we have ways to test the iPhone if we need to,
Mm.
using other tools and stuff. So,
Very cool. Okay, well, we gotta wrap this up. I want to say thank you, appreciate it, and thank you for
thank
all
you.
the helpful information.
Welcome.
All right,
Bye.
bye.